Welcome to an Elite Smart Athletes podcast. My name is Tolu and I'm a strength and conditioning coach and basketball skills trainer. But being an elite athlete is more than just lifting weights and doing drills. Every human has to deal with deeper thoughts. So this is the podcast where your inner athlete talks. Welcome back to the Inner Athlete Talks podcast. If you're new to Elite Smart Athletes, get to know. You can catch me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Been around for like 5 years online. I train athletes and all that. But if you want to know more about me, then listen to episode 1. I appreciate all your feedback on episode 1, by the way, as well. There was a bit of background noise, mainly because it was just the AC. I live in Dubai, so I need air conditioning. It's summer right now, which is like 40 plus degrees Celsius. Don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. I'm not going to do the conversion, but just Google that. But yeah, it was interesting entering the podcast sphere. And as I said, I use this podcast just to kind of rant a little bit about different issues that I see spoken about a lot. Also, other feedback I got, which was that I was blinking too much. My eyes were dry. Let me live, man. Yeah, if you're listening as an audio listener, then you should check out the YouTube if you want to see me blinking like a crazy man. But hopefully today I'm not. I'm really going to be conscious of that. So yeah. But today I just kind of want to go into a bit about load management because it is the off season at the moment for most professional sports, most athletes in general, if you're an amateur athlete too. So, it's a time where people want to try and get better, but it's also a time where people that have been injured over the last seasons really need to make a push so that they can be solid for the next season and not get. And I'm speaking as a pretty injury prone person myself. I've had a lot of knee injuries over the course of my career, my playing career, my life, mainly in the patella area. And most recently, it was at the beginning of June. I've had one that's had me sidelined for a bit for the past 3 weeks now, I think. So yeah, I'm pretty injury prone. I've had a shoulder dislocation. I've had many ankle sprains. I get back issues sometimes. Just running, if I go for a jog, once I get past like a mile, then my back starts to hurt. And yeah, I'm a pretty injury prone guy, which is why I'm into sports performance and strength and conditioning and physical therapy and things like that, because I want to figure out how, why is my body breaking down? How can I build it to be better? And I have found a lot of ways to do that, but sometimes things are unavoidable. But a lot of athletes that are going to go into the next season, you want to make sure that you're robust enough to last the season, and also that you come back stronger so that you're actually better than where you were before. But obviously we hear the term, and I'm speaking mainly for my basketball fans, if you do watch the NBA, we hear the term load management come up a lot, and it has a lot of negative connotations. Let's be real. We're talking about Kawhi Leonard and Paul George for the most part, the Clippers, who have been quite disappointing in terms of them putting together such a, strong roster and just kind of being underwhelming. I don't want to say the complete roster was entirely strong this season, to be honest, but I feel like they've had stronger rosters. I'm a Dallas Mavs fan, so we play the Clippers all the time in the playoffs. Well, not this year because we didn't bloody qualify, did we? But usually we end up running in with the Clippers at some point. So I watch those games. I've seen better Clippers squads. This wasn't necessarily the best, but it's always speaking about how Kawhi Leonard and Paul George don't necessarily play a lot of games together. And we hear a lot from former NBA players who, when they're talking about the newer generation of players and how they sit out games, and they kind of equate it to having a weak mindset, because back in the day you would have just pushed through that. And not to say, I feel like there's definitely some good elements of that, because again, being able to power through when playing sports is your profession, you kind of have to find a way to do it because it's your job, you're getting paid to do it, right? But in terms of using the word load management in that negative way, I don't think that's correct. You'll hear many other trainers online probably discussing this, and it's something that I'm particularly passionate about because I have to do it personally for myself, because as I said, I'm so injury prone, but also for athletes that I train to make sure that they're not doing too much. So yeah, let's go into what is load management, and I feel like it's very basic it says it in the title. It's what it says on the tin. It's managing the amount of load that you have to do. So it doesn't mean taking rest. A coach, if they wanted you to rest, they would say, go and rest. They wouldn't say, go and manage your load. So it's not about taking time off. It's just about making sure that you're not doing too much to cause an overstress on your body. And as I mentioned before, I've had knee problems. So patellar tendonitis, which is also known as jumper's knee, is an overuse injury. the term overuse essentially means there's been too much load that has gone unmanaged. So to be able to heal it, you have to remanage that load. And that's pretty much all it is that simple. And there are so many different types of overuse injuries. Most tendinitises are from overuse. And the simple solution is just to get the right amount of work. Now, it doesn't mean completely stop, because when you completely stop, there's a lot of studies out there that show that bones and joints benefit from having force go through them, and not only just benefit, it actually helps grow the tissues around them. And if those tissues can grow and become strong, it means you become more robust. But if you put too much force on it, that's when you break it down, right? Just as anything, everything has a breaking point. And even like from a physics standpoint, like there is an amount of force that will break any object, most likely. Like, I don't know if there are probably some unbreakable objects out there in the world, but you know, on a human body, like we are not invincible. So there are amounts of force that will break it down. And for certain people who maybe just weren't in the right environment, they don't have the same nutrients in their body as other people, that amount of force is different. So that's why different people have a different load management schedule. So I feel myself blinking again, by the way. I can sense it. I'm trying, guys, I'm trying. But yeah, different people have to manage their loads differently. So we can't just apply a one-size-fits-all rule to every athlete. That's not how it works. You wouldn't do it for people that have different goals. For example, if someone wants to lose fat, someone wants to get faster, someone wants to put on muscle, someone's trying to get more powerful, you wouldn't give them the same plan. I certainly wouldn't as a trainer. I would be trying to make sure that I tailor that plan to the individual athlete. In the same vein, if a certain athlete has, 2 practice sessions a week and 2 games a week, another athlete maybe has like 5, those have different requirements to manage their load throughout the season and in the off season too. So we have to think more individually about that. And again, it's not a negative thing to manage load. It's just about proper programming of a training program, essentially. So I'm not sure if I completely made sense when I was describing what load management is, but I hope you understand it. It's essentially just managing the amount of work you have to do. So how do we go into managing load? So the main thing is obviously the organization of your schedule. If you can organize your schedule in a way that makes sense, then you'll be able to balance the demands that your body has to deal with so that you'll be able to make it through the season, God willing, without any injuries of your own doing. Obviously, there are the external factors that may cause injuries, but essentially, there'll be nothing that like the overuse type of injuries that I mentioned earlier. So how should we go into this organization? Well, I do have a video on YouTube about organizing your schedule, and I've kind of updated my views from that video since then, just slightly, but a lot of that is still very applicable. But I'd say the first port of call is to look at the intensity of the work you're doing. So again, I use the example of like athletes that have different number of practices versus games. In the off season, obviously a lot of players don't necessarily have a lot of games. Even if you're playing in like a summer league, like you can afford to go through that. But first thing is looking at the intensity of your days. So let's say you have a lifting session. What kind of lifting session is it? Are you going through mobility and movement patterns? Are you on the court or on a field, maybe doing a beach workout on the sand? Are you just in the pool? Or are you lifting heavy? Are you lifting light? Is it power? All of those things kind of equate to different types of intensities. And we can try and categorize with like a high, mid, low intensity, but essentially, I feel like it's up to the athlete to figure out how intense it is. There are different measures that we can use as trainers if you have the equipment available, obviously to check, such as like heart rate monitors and things like that. But, if you don't have that, and I'm assuming you're watching this or listening to this because you are an athlete who's trying to get better, then, just try and figure out. So there's a thing called your RPE, your rate of perceived exertion, and it's like a scale of 1 to 10 where 1 is like something that's kind of low intensity, quite easy to do, and 10 is like extremely hard, you're dying at the end, you might be throwing up. And you kind of just want to rate the intensity of a session at the end, and then you'll be able to know, okay, this is quite an intense session for me. So let's say you have that 1 session in the morning, Then if you had another session, let's say that's more sport specific on the court. So yeah, as a basketball player, you may be on the court. If you play another sport, just whatever it is. Let's say you have a skill session that is rather intense, or again, over the summer, you're playing in a summer league game. You know, a game is an intense environment. You're going at max speed, max efforts, quite off instinct. So, you know, that's why people are more at risk to get injured in games anyway. But, you know, you're going at full speed essentially in a game. Well, then I would consider pairing your high intensity, you know, workout with another high intensity session or game or another high intensity workout, and do them on the same day, so that the next day, where you have your lower intensity stuff like the pull or the mobility, you know, things like that, then you compare that with a maybe lower intensity skill workout like a shoot around or something like that. And that way you're kind of giving your body and your nervous system time to rest from high intensity work. And if you just keep alternating the days, and maybe depending on how many days you want to train, let's say you want to do 2 workouts a day for 6 days a week, you know, you're trying to really push yourself because you want to get better. I would maybe keep the mornings as a time that I would work on my body and my athleticism, and then I would maybe keep the evenings as the time to work on my sport, just as an example. So Monday, I might go with a heavy lifting session in the gym where I'm, you know, lifting super heavy weights, and I might do some intense cardio. And then in the evening, I might do an intense skill session. Maybe I'm playing some 2-on-2, 3-on-3, you know, skill session with another person, or I'm going to an open run scrimmage, or maybe it's like a summer league game scenario, like I mentioned before. And then the next day, I would make that my low intensity day. So the Monday is high intensity. Tuesday would be the low intensity day, where in the morning, maybe I would do some prehab, you know, some isometric exercises for the body, some mobility work. Maybe I go to the pool and swim a little bit, do some yoga, something just to relax the body a little bit. And then in the evening might be when I might just do a shoot around by myself, just because it's slightly lower intensity. It might just be spot up shooting, stationary work, just light stuff, not really running full court too much, just to keep it a bit low. And I would just keep alternating the days like that as you go through, and then just alternate. So the same thing you would do on the Monday, the high intensity would be repeated on the Wednesday and Friday. And then the same thing you do on the Tuesday would then be repeated on the Thursday and Saturday. And then you keep the Sunday as a rest day where you do absolutely nothing to just give yourself some time to recover. And then you go again. And that's how you manage the load of your summer workouts essentially, or any type of workouts, because you could kind of do this in the season if you just replace the high intensity court time with maybe a team practice or an actual game in the season. It's the way that you would manage your load. And that's all that these players in the NBA are doing when they're load managing. They're just figuring out how much load their body needs to take. And I'm sure, you know, these are NBA players. I'm just talking as a guy who's been training people for 5 years. You know, this is the NBA. They have top level performance staff in there who, you know, will be tracking the amount of force going through their body, the amount of jumps they're probably doing each day. So when they're managing the load, they're doing it down to the littlest number. They know exactly how many minutes they should be on the court. You know, that's why minutes restrictions are a thing when players come back from injury. You know, they're really going down into the nitty-gritty details to make sure that they're not overdoing it. So that is one way to manage load, is just by the intensity of the days. Now, I went into this in the YouTube video, so if you are an audio listener, again, go over to YouTube, check out the YouTube video on organizing your weekly workout schedule. But one thing that I didn't talk about in that video was for people like myself who are injury prone, and again, this kind of probably applies more to like using that Kawhi Leonard, Paul George example. The one thing that we don't really consider necessarily when talking about the intensity, we're talking about the intensity of the workouts and then splitting that up in terms of how we manage the load. I know I just blinked a lot there. Please forgive me. Like my eyes are still dry. There's like a bright light shining in my face, so please allow me. But yeah, when we're talking about the load, we're talking about the intensity of the individual sessions. I think we also, like I mentioned earlier, you know, these are NBA players with performance staff that are looking at maybe the amount of force going through their body, but particularly through their joints. So I think there's also a way to look at the intensity on your joints. Okay, so this is Tolu from the future here, because everything that you've listened to / watched, I recorded probably like 2 months ago, and it was actually a re-recording because my mic, which is here, was muted the first time I filmed this podcast or recorded this podcast. Then when I went to edit it, I realized that the last section of it was also missing audio because I guess my mic must have either muted or the receiver on the camera died. But either way, now this time around, I've checked, I've tested the audio, I have charged all the mics, all the receivers, so audio should be good. So let's continue. So looking at this mathematically, when we are talking about a basketball skill workout, like I said, we were just talking about maybe a shoot around where you're just taking stationary shots. Now there is a research study and I've got it in front of me. It is from 2014, where they tested 20 pretty well-trained Division II college players. They made sure they got them through like a 10-minute warm-up to make sure they were cool, and then they just wanted to test the forces that their bodies were receiving on impact on the ground from each jump shot. So just essentially, how much force do they have to deal with when they land from a jump shot? And the study showed that on average, this is the average, each participant was probably dealing with about 5 times their body weight, which means that there were some that were higher and some that were lower. So imagine if there was one who was dealing with like 7 times their own body weight, and they're like a big dude. Like that's a lot of force going through the joints. And the study essentially also says that the people that were dealing with the higher end of that average usually had improper jump mechanics, and that's not inconsistent with even NBA players. So just because it was Division II players that they were testing, it's the same problem that any sort of human would be dealing with, because it's just the way that gravity works with our body. So, force equals mass times acceleration, or F equals mg, because we're dealing with gravity. And yeah, it's like gravity will pull us down based on how heavy we are. So there's not really any escaping that, even if you're doing just a light skill workout. And then think about that. If you are just going for 100 shots, not even 100 makes, just 100 shots in general, you're probably going to receive around 500 times your body weight. Me, I'm about 100 kg. That's 5,000 newtons of force going through my body just on a light skill workout. Then maybe in the evening I'm going to go and actually play. Now, granted, I might not get as many jump shots as that, but there's just more force that your body's dealing with, and if you're not prepared to handle that, it's just going to be too much, and then you'll get hurt because you're just dealing with force, or another word for force is load. You're dealing with a lot of load, and if you're not managing it carefully, you're at risk of injury. And as I was talking about, for someone who is dealing with, let's say, overuse injuries like a tendonitis, let's go with patella tendonitis, which is jumper's knee, that is high intensity. Again, someone like me with jumper's knee, that's 5,000 kilograms going through your knee each session, and it could only be 30 minutes. So in your mind, you're not thinking it's high intensity because it's light. You're just taking spot shots, but over time, it will degrade you. That's why it ends up being called an overuse injury. So then how do we deal with this? And I think that the solution is to organize the workouts in terms of joint intensity instead. So instead of trying to mix up like a high intensity gym session with maybe a high intensity court session, maybe you'll do your low intensity court session in the morning, as I suggested earlier, and then you'll do your high intensity court session in the evening, because that way you're getting your, amount of force through your joints there, which is heavy. But then on a gym day, you might only do 5 to 15 jumps in a workout. So you're not getting as much force through your joints on that session. And then in the evening, if maybe you do mobility or something like that, again, you're working on the joints in that session. So your joints are getting a rest in between. Maybe not necessarily your neuromuscular system, but your joints in general are getting a rest. And as someone who personally deals with this, so I'm just saying this anecdotally, but you feel much better when your joints feel fresh than when your neuromuscular system feels fresh, generally. Because joints can be such a limiting factor in your performance. Like if they're always sore and then you're going into games and you just have sore knees, sore ankle, sore elbow, whatever it is, you're never going to perform at 100%. But if they're as fresh as they can be, then you're giving yourself a chance to perform at a high level, as long as you're not also killing yourself in the gym as well, and you're doing the right things, especially in season. You have to manage that too, but that's a whole different conversation that maybe I'll go to in another podcast episode. And of course, an opportunity for a quick plug, because what can you do to help your joints? Well, you can try and get some some of the necessary nutrients through them, such as a UC2 type collagen supplement. And what one would I recommend? Obviously, let's go with the Mobilizer by Avea Life. Can you see that? Yeah, it's coming up now on the screen. Yeah, the Mobilizer by Avea Life. It contains UC2 collagen, hydro Kirk, which has got curamine extract, some maritime pine bark extract, and other different nutrients that can help with joint development. And with the code Elite Smart, you can save 15% on the supplement too. I've been taking it for probably the past at least 3 months now, and especially 2023 for me has been a rough year injury-wise. Like February 1st, after my first game of this new season that I play in the leagues that I play in Dubai. And if you're confused about how leagues work in Dubai because it was February, then go and check out my YouTube video on basketball in Dubai and the Seoul Baller Bubble basketball leagues. But yeah, played one game, and then the following week I went up for a layup, had a micro tear in my patella tendon, spent 8 weeks rehabbing it, went back into the summer league season, managed to play the majority of it, and then I landed on a rebound and did the exact same thing on the exact same knee. The reason why I think I was hurt is because there was a supplement I was using in the past, but I think it's been discontinued, so I'm not going to mention it. Also, they're not paying me, so why would I do that? But that supplement got discontinued, so I wasn't able to keep on using it. And then there was a bit of a gap where I was looking for a supplement, but then thankfully I was able to find this Avea Life one, and I think it's been helping with the rehab. But also I've been a bit more careful and more patient with the rehab process too. So as opposed to just 8 weeks, I'm currently in about week 13, 14, and I'm still giving it like another 3 to 4 weeks before I get back onto the court properly. So take your time with the rehab. Again, manage your load carefully. And yeah, that's essentially what I'm doing in my rehab process. I'm just load management. And you know, that's what physios and everything do. It's load management. It all links in together. Like I just bring things together, man. So that is a solution for just a way to organize your workouts in order to do load management yourself. But another thing to factor in is, especially during the season, what if you don't actually get enough load? Because I've been talking about reducing load, but load management goes both ways. You can also increase load as well if you're not getting enough. And the main scenarios where that will happen is in a game. So let's say you do all your team practices, team practice is hard, you're doing everything you need to do because everyone gets on the court in a team practice. But in a game, you might only get like 5 minutes. You might not get into the game at all. Then that load that you were expecting to receive, you don't end up getting. So then, and you'll notice this with professional players in most sports, but let's take basketball in the NBA. You'll notice that the bench players, after the games, they'll do a full workout after the game, and that's because they have load left in the tank. So, they have to manage the load the opposite way in terms of making sure they get the necessary work that they need to through their body, because they're not going to break down from sitting on the bench the whole game. And if you listen to the podcasts of former NBA players, you'll hear of players that do that. And essentially, you're just trying to fill those buckets to make sure you're doing the right amount of work. So when it comes to the term load management, it's really just a balancing act. It's not a negative word to say don't do any training, don't play any games. It's just about balancing the amount of work. It can go down, but it can also go back up. And when we're, especially on a rehab type of thing, it's all about a slow progression over time to make sure that things are robust and don't break again, because availability is the best ability. Shout out to the Hoop Genius podcast and BJ Armstrong, who always says that all the time on the podcast. Availability is the best ability. If you can't get on the court, what's the point? Why would these teams pay these players like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George if they can't actually get on the court? They need to manage their load. They're more valuable if they can at least play half the games than if they don't, or if they manage their schedule over time, over a number of years, so that maybe they have a longer term plan for the future, that maybe it's 2024, 25, that they believe that that's when they're going to compete, because they will have got them to a point where they're healthy enough to fulfill a whole season. Anyway, that is it for today's episode on load management. Let me know what you think, so leave a comment on YouTube or on any different podcasting platforms. And whilst you're at it, leave a rating and review as well, especially on the podcasting audio platforms. On YouTube, obviously, leave a like, subscribe, join the family. We out here trying to get to 10K on YouTube. If you don't follow me on on Instagram or TikTok, then, give me a follow there. Trying to get to 50K on Instagram. We're at about 30K on TikTok. Let's try and push that to 40. We're trying to grow the movement. And yeah, I will share some of these clips on there too. So, tell a friend to tell a friend. Let them know. Again, Avea Life, the mobilizer joint supplement, you can get 15% off. I will leave the link in the description of the podcast notes and obviously of the description of the YouTube video. But you can also go to my social medias and click the link in my bio and you'll find the links there. Or you can go to www.elitesmartathletes.com and you'll see the ads for it on there. Speaking of which, my online coaching is open. So if you want to train with me, if you want to know how to organize your workouts specifically in the ways that I've described, then head over to the online coaching section and we can get to work and get to it. But also, if you're just trying to get more bounce, then there's a free vertical jump workout for you there too, all on www.elitesmartathletes.com. Again, that will be in the link of the podcast notes / the YouTube video description. But I appreciate you guys rocking with me, listening to me just rant about load management and trying to defend it, even though in the public sphere of basketball and athleticism, it's not necessarily looked on with favorable eyes. But we've got to try and challenge conceptions here. But I'd be interested to hear other people's point of views as well, and maybe we could collab on a future podcast, or I'll at least mention it in the next episodes. But yeah, appreciate you guys, and as always, until next time, stay blessed.